Welcome to Monkey World 3D's terrain texturing tutorial. In the past, we've dealt with a wireframe terrain and used it as our visuals for sculpting, smoothing, raising and lowering of terrain. In this tutorial, we're going to cover applying images over our terrain and how those layered images affect the final result in your 3D view. To get started, we need to do a preliminary prerequisite step. We must apply a light to our level. We're going to go into the activation window and select Level Light. Then we're going to go under Level and select Light. Enable both the light and the sunlight option. Excuse me. You can tell that the muted gray backdrop affected our terrain. We're going to set a couple default variables here to 300, and we'll go over these in more detail with the light tutorial, but for right now just put in these values and we'll get started on the terrain. You can tell that when we did that, the light placed almost an ambient effect on our terrain. In order to get started with the textures applied to a terrain, let's go into the Terrain tab, expand the texture layers, and click Add. We're going to select a detail image which resembles a finely grained concrete. You can tell that the viewport has changed to show that there is this gradient applied to it. If we click Add again and select everybody's favorite hero, we can see how our terrain is molded across the level. You'll notice that the monkey image is wrapped. We have a little bit of stretching on the cliff faces, but otherwise the monkey is in good form. Now this is truly a monkey world. I'm going to select the monkey texture itself, which is Texture 1, and then select the Advanced Settings button. Within the Advanced Settings, you can control how the image is rendered over your terrain. I'm going to click in the Map combo box and start using the up arrow to cycle through the different maps that we can apply. You'll notice that with the first click, there's a pixelated look. The anti-aliasing of this image has gone from being blurred, which is reasonable image look, to starting to be more pixelated. The higher we go, be it nearest linear, nearest, even linear, which seems very smooth, nearest looks good here, but if you'll notice in the background, the image is becoming more distorted. If we keep going up to none, we have the raw image and some default, really broken down pixelation in the background. The further you get away from the camera, the more noticeable it's going to be. I'm going to go back and just drop it down to the default, linear. The same is true with nearest. If you change it to nearest and start cycling through, the breakdown becomes more apparent. We'll go into greater detail on each of these options in the PDF guide, but for right now, you can play around with each of your layers differently and see how the final result affects your terrain. In order to remove a texture, you can just simply select it and click on the Remove button. Notice that we're back to Texture 0 applied over our terrain. Usually, instead of using the monkey, I have a default texture that I'll submit up to the group so that they can use it on their own. It's called No Texture 64, and it's simply a 64 by 64 image so that I can see what the flow of the level is. Where is the stretching going to occur? How is the blurring going to be affected? And how is it going to wrap over the terrain? And again, we can remove off any of the textures that we want. And we'll go back right to the start of where it all began. One thing I'd like to point out that is still under a little bit of development, if you click on the Generate button, you can add individual layers here. However, the Commit button is missing off of the form. So you can apply your changes, but it doesn't really take effect. Personally, I'd recommend simply going under the Texture Layers drop-down because you have greater control over the different layers, their advanced settings, and how it's applied on the level. As we showed you in this video tutorial, moving the advanced settings window off to the side allows you to see in real time what those changes are making to that texture on your terrain. Play around with this feature and start throwing on some textures to the terrain you've been playing around with and molding. If you have any suggestions on how you'd like to see this applied in future video tutorial releases, don't hesitate to post a suggestion.